What is up, Nets fans? Welcome to a live Brooklyn Buzz. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Jack Manuel. And Jack, we have something to talk about today.
What's the one-word reaction, Nick?
Oh, that's a really good. I haven't even thought about that. Obviously, you can see that I'm pretty happy about it. I'm excited. Excited is just perfect one-word reaction. I'm excited for on-tuck Kyrie, what he can do. This is arguably the biggest free agent signing the Nets have had in quite some time, maybe ever.
Come on, we're not talking Deron Williams here, mate. We're not talking Ed Davis. This is Kyrie Irving, an all-NBA superstar, championship-winning player. This is big.
It's huge. I mean, it's a top 15 player. Free agency hasn't even started, and you already have the commitment. I think that's a big deal too. He didn't take meetings with anybody else. He's not even going to take a meeting with anybody else. He's going to meet with the Nets early 6 o'clock tomorrow, and then it's going to be a done deal. This is big stuff for Sean Marks when he took over the team in 2016. You told me that in 2019 he was going to sign a top 15 player. I probably would have laughed.
Yeah, I think that commitment shows a lot, and we can delve into the nitty-gritty of it really soon. D-Rock's one-word reaction is whoa. I think that's a pretty good one. My one-word reaction, I've been sort of mulling this over because I knew I was going to ask it to you right off the chat. Bittersweet. I think that it's weird. It's going to take some time to process. It's odd how, as fans, we could become so invested in these players, despite the fact that they're not family members, they're not close friends, but they still have such an impact on us.
They feel like it though sometimes.
It certainly does, and it's like the fact we were chatting a little bit about movies and stuff, but the stuff that doesn't necessarily have the most tangible effect on your life and is not exactly there can still be incredibly impactful. And for me, that's what makes this bittersweet. I tweeted out the fact that D'Lo's provided me with some incredible opportunities to just break down some of his insane gameplay for OTG and Nets Republic. It's been a heck of a couple of years with him and watching him grow into the player and man he has become. He's going to have great success wherever he goes, but got my third eye ready, my dude.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think D'Angelo deserves a lot of props. We're going to talk about him in a little bit, but came to the Nets, wasn't really sure, dealt with that whole Nick Young nonsense in LA, came here, become a star, and he helped put the Nets on the map. He did have an impact at changing this culture and changing the perception of the Nets. If he wasn't on the team last year, they don't make the playoffs. They're probably not signing Kyrie Irving right now. So he has much of an impact for the success that, as much as they are moving forward. It's kind of like Toronto had to sacrifice DeMar DeRozan. We probably are going to have to sacrifice D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, it's a pretty apt comparison. So which route should we go down first? We're going to go down the Kyrie route or the D'Lo route?
Let's go with the Kyrie. Let's say positive first, because then we'll bounce in and get a little negative and sadness with the D'Lo stuff, and then we'll bounce to some KD stuff. But overall, I think, like we said, in my eyes, I think you'd probably agree, Kyrie's easily top 3 point guard in the NBA.
Yeah, no doubt. All NBA caliber consistently. The question for me is, and me, I'm always glass half empty sort of dude when it comes to positive news when it relates to the Brooklyn Nets. Have we seen the best of Kyrie Irving already? And is he now going to be on the downward spiral? Obviously, we have incredible medical stuff, and there's been plenty of articles about that and how that relates to Kyrie and KD and the like. Hopefully, that could have a really positive impact on Kyrie. How we manage him, I think, is going to be one thing to really watch for. But Kyrie is a proven winner by himself, not necessarily. But the fact that I think when we chatted a little bit about the start, the fact that he is sort of gone all in with this Brooklyn Nets team, and the fact that he's just gone, look, I'm all in on this, and despite the fact that KD hasn't necessarily committed 100% yet, we don't know what's going on there. We'll chat about that obviously a little bit later too. But I'm excited to see what Kyrie can bring to the Brooklyn Nets franchise. My Kyrie 2s and my Kyrie 4s had that little bit of extra specialness to me now because they're my guy now. They're a guy I have to support. I have to start liking some of his Instagram posts, which Brian Windhorst certainly wouldn't approve of. But Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn in a Brooklyn Nets Cougar uniform is going to look pretty slick. Those photoshops are going to look nice.
Yeah, I'm excited. Like you said, top 15 player. We talked on tuck Kyrie. He just has these moments in the last 5 to 10 years. There's a lot of moments in the NBA where you're like, oh, Kyrie did that. We think of the finals with the Cavs winning. Kyrie had a huge impact on that. And then also, I think the biggest concern, like you mentioned, I think is health. The knee thing is a little bit scary. Obviously, great medical staff in Brooklyn. They've done wonders with older guys. Hopefully, they can maintain him. I would expect him to probably play no more than 70 games. I think they play him smart, especially with the injury history he's had. And I'm a little bit less nervous about the locker room stuff because, like you mentioned, he committed to Brooklyn so early. And then you and I were talking about an article that dropped on ESPN. Some of the reasons he was upset with what was going on was Boston was some of the younger guys not taking the NBA games as serious. There was an instance where they had a back-to-back. They had just gotten into Miami coming off another game, which I believe they had lost. They were going to play Orlando the next night. Instead of, staying home and staying in and getting prepped for the next day when you just played a game and you're playing another game, the team went out and did whatever they did. They lost the following night. Kyrie stayed on the court and shot and hoped that some of his teammates would continue to do the same thing. So I think some of it's a little bit of him being misunderstood. Obviously, he's an adult and needs to communicate a little bit better. But I think I could view that in a positive light. And I think that's something the culture in Brooklyn, I don't think you're going to see that as much with players being a little bit reckless. That whole idea, especially when Sean Marks took over, was like no nonsense mentality. It's about basketball. We're about winning games here.
Yeah, I think that article was, and Jackie McMullen is probably one of the best, if not the best writer, and her sources are impeccable. And the fact that she was so complimentary, not just slightly complimentary of Kyrie, and has been over his time in Boston, but just providing a more balanced view of the Kyrie hate has been, a bit out of control, to say the least. And the fact that sort of, it was tempered a little bit by someone who is such a respected source. Was really positive, and the fact that people will question his work ethic, his personality, and I don't think you can. You can probably question his personality, but I think at the end of the day, these guys are allowed to be who they are. They're human beings.
Exactly.
But I think that how he brings, I think the team chemistry will be a little bit better in Brooklyn because of what you mentioned. Despite the fact that we are a young team, obviously you take out D'Angelo and you put guys like Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen. These guys, I think, are going to mesh pretty well. I think Spencer Dinwiddie, probably more than any other. We're going to see some duo Instagram posts, some Insta stories with those guys. I think they're going to become a real biffle trio duo. And then you add in Jared Allen, who's really close with Spencer as well. I think it could be pretty fun. And Spencer's already posted on his Instagram and one a photo of him getting fouled by Kyrie Irving. So, and we know from reports from Mark Stein that he was a part of the Kyrie recruitment. So read into that what you will, but it certainly bodes positively.
I agree. I think the fact is one of the key members of the Nets is whatever you want to view Spencer Dinwiddie. He's still a six man, but he's a leader of this team. Wanted Kyrie to come and is developed somewhat of a relationship with him over the summer or this last month to kind of get him to come to Brooklyn. I think it says a lot. You mentioned Jared Allen, obviously Karis LeVert. A lot of these guys, I don't think are guys that Kyrie's going to look at and be like, oh, they don't know how to behave or whatnot. We know the work ethic of a guy like LeVert, Joe Harris, Spencer. So I feel pretty good about the culture and locker room side. Obviously, there's still a chance, new pieces coming in. There's going to be other guys coming in later in free agency. I think it would be smart of Sean Marks to hopefully bring back a guy like Jared Dudley if he can get him on the vets minimum.
Oh, definitely. I think that this is move one, and I can't remember who it was that tweeted it, so I'm sorry that I'm not giving you credit, but I think that move 2, 3, 4, and 5 is just as important, and I think that you can say the same thing about that as what's happening in Los Angeles right now. Yeah, you got your big fish, or your first big fish at least. Can you get that the first catch of the day? Exactly. Can you get that second big fish? Can you get the third smaller big fish? Can you get everything around it that can help build the roster, build a winning team? And I think that there's literally news that just popped up. Will jumped into the chat that the fact that if the Nets don't land KD, that their interest will divert to Tobias Harris. I think we'll stay on Kyrie Irving for a little bit before we address that. But last season, I think it was underrated how well Kyrie Irving did play. Nearly 24 points per game.
Crazy.
It was outstanding. Nearly 24 points per game, 5 rebounds, nearly 7 assists, which he's not necessarily known for. Nearly 49% from the field, 40% from 3, 87% from the free throw line, and a PR of 24. I think when we make a direct comparison to D'Angelo Russell, Kyrie Irving is a much more efficient basketballer.
And I think Kenny and Sean kind of appreciate that a little bit more. I think they believe in the efficiency, and some of the turnover stuff with D'Angelo might have rubbed them the wrong way. Yeah,
I think that I don't know if there's I highly doubt that there is any bad will in relation to D'Angelo Russell, and I think that he is a great teammate, a very coachable player. But I'm very interested you sort of touched on it very, very briefly there, Nick. The dynamic between Coach Kenny and Kyrie is going to be one to certainly watch, because there's a plenty that has come out, obviously, in relation to Kyrie and Brad Stevens, that whole government comment that he made to him in a video session. God, I hope he doesn't say that sort of shit to Kenny. I'll be so annoyed. But it could provide some decent content for the buzz. That's saying something that's understating it, to say the least. But yeah, how do you think the coach-player dynamic is going to be with Kyrie and our boy Kenny?
No, Kenny hasn't really, okay, I like that. Hasn't really had to coach many guys that are not coachable. I think one benefit is he's well liked by players, whoever have dealt with him, from the Knicks to the Hawks to the international teams to the Nets. I think it's easy to build respect for him because he's known for getting on the court and kind of almost training with you. Obviously, he does a little bit less as a head coach. So I think he'll kind of buy into that. And then obviously you have the support of the other guys. And I think Kyrie also knows the narrative about him going to the season. You mentioned the Boston hate. It was high. And some of it, I think, was just leaked on purpose to try to make him seem bad on his way out. He's going to try to change that, and I think he's going to come in with more of a positive attitude. And it's been talked about his camp wanting him to come to Brooklyn to help change that perception.
Yeah, and I think that Kyrie as well, obviously when there is a negative perception towards you from outsiders, you don't want to have labor and continue to make that sort of linger at your sort of second destination, where it's sort of supposed to be sort of a fresh start. You're creating a new. So I think that there's going to be motivation for Kyrie to be a bit more cohesive when it comes to warming to his teammates. Sort of, obviously he was somewhat of an outsider. I think he took the LeBron leadership route, but he doesn't have the LeBron leadership credentials. So he can't necessarily, that was sort of his role model for so long, in the sense that, that's where he learned leadership from. He was guided by a leader in that sort of sense. Whereas now, I don't think that the emphasis of leadership is going to be just on him. Al Horford was sort of a guy there, but he's a lot more quiet spoken. Whereas we've got a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, who is outspoken, intelligent, and I think is, a similar sort of wavelength, like I mentioned, to Kyrie. I think he's going to have someone to bounce ideas off. And I think that, like you mentioned, Nick, adding in those vet guys is going to be crucial. Retaining a guy like Jared Dudley, I think, is going to be incredibly important. Be it Damari Carroll, whoever it might be along the wings. You need those sort of guys just to sort of temper things down, to be sort of the bridge between the coaches and the players, and the players and the younger players, the vets and the younger players. I think that despite the fact that, I'm optimistic, I'm excited, I'm a mixture of emotions and adjectives, there's still a long way to go for the Brooklyn Nets to become, a bona fide contender out east. I don't think we are right now with just Kyrie replacing D'Angelo Russell. I don't think it makes us that much better. It does, because Kyrie Irving objectively is a better player, like we've spoken about, but we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, there's still a lot more dominoes to fall in free agency. From Kevin Durant to Tobias Harris to what they do with the room exception, or do they fill out the roster differently? And just sticking on the Kyrie front, you mentioned, we kind of touched on the efficiency. There's just like a lot of things that he can do that make you feel a little bit better. And I think having other ball handlers in Brooklyn, where you look at that Boston team, and a lot of guys weren't necessarily playmakers for others. There wasn't necessarily a great backup point guard. Terry Rozier had a really bad season. Jason Tatum can score for himself. Jaylen Brown can't really create for others. The only guy who's really helping the offense run is Al Horford. You get him with two guards in Karis LeVert and Spencer Dinwiddie, who can, I think, make his life a lot easier. And you mentioned the relationship with Spencer. I'm really interested to see how they develop that on the court, because I think it's something that could really work well, because both guys are extremely intelligent.
Oh, absolutely. Incredibly intelligent. And I think that the three-guard lineups now, I think, are going to be a little more cohesive. I'm using that word a little bit. It's 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, guys. Give me a break. But I think that there's room for experimentation, and I think that Kyrie is going to enjoy Brooklyn, more than probably any other destination. I'm really excited to see, even just preseason games, because we got a glimpse of what we could see, from Karis LeVert and D'Angelo Russell in preseason games against the Knicks. And a lot of that stuff sort of panned out, same with Rodions. So obviously he'll be used sparingly. I'm really intrigued to see what his medicals are, how he is, doing, physically. Obviously he's had that time off, but, he's going to have the best training stuff like we've spoken about. But there's just so much things. I don't think we're going to be able to cover it completely in just one episode of Brooklyn Buzz, and thankfully we've got probably months to do so. And I'll be doing plenty of video breakdowns too. But is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we move on from Kyrie?
I think one thing to just point out, and this is the optimist, I'm the more positive one on the show, is this last season he did not have an off season to, improve his game. 27 is when you enter your prime. Last year he's coming off the knee surgery. So this year, getting with, arguably one of the best player development staffs in the NBA, we saw improvements in older players' games so far in Brooklyn. DeMarre had a great season within the first year he came to the Nets. It would not surprise me we saw Kyrie pick up his game a little bit. I don't think he's going to hit some crazy new level, but if things improved a little bit, I would not be surprised just because of the system the Nets run and the player development staff, and you mentioned the medical team. There's a lot of things trending up. Obviously, there's some nervousness around the knees, but I'm excited to see what the Nets staff can do with him because we know not just Kenny, the entire coaching staff is excellent helping these guys develop.
Yeah, you would normally say that this is when peak sort of players in really sort of get into their prime from that sort of 26 to 29 range. And beyond that is sort of when you get a little bit worrisome. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about small point guards with Kemba Walker and Chris Paul. Kyrie Irving has a little bit of size about him. He's not as tall as D'Angelo Russell, obviously, but I think he'll age better in a lot of senses because he has, an incredible three-point shot, probably maybe the third or fourth best point guard shooter. I would say, Stephen Curry and Damian Lillard are 1, 2, and then probably, Kyrie, Kemba are probably 3 and 4, whatever you want to sort of chuck those around. But Nick, in terms of how confident are you that we are going to see a better season from him? I know we sort of just touched on it, and probably Kyrie's best season was that championship season. And I think last season goes under the radar, was probably his second best season. Despite that first year in Boston being, a bit of a tumultuous year with the injuries and such. Do you think that we are going to see Kyrie take another step up? Do you think we're going to see Kyrie, sort of level out and this is going to be his sort of peak level and he'll maintain that? Or is he going to take a step back? What's going to change about his game? What's going to stay the same? Obviously, just forecasting ahead at a very early stage.
I think a lot is going to, I'm going to take a cop out a little bit, that it's going to depend on who the next free agent is and how many touches that person demands, or if it's Kevin Durant, who's not going to probably play into the next season, or is that Tobias Harris? I think we could see a slight improvement. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a huge bump like I mentioned, but around this level, I think if you were to get this for the next 2 to 3 years from Kyrie, like you mentioned, the efficiency is really good, and it went under the radar because Boston's season was so up and down. If, it's a better season for him, I think he's getting a lot more love for the numbers he put up. Like, it was pretty close to a 50, 40, 90 season. And obviously we know it's only been done in the teens, in terms of NBA history.
Yeah, I think Malcolm Brogdon did it last season, but it's really hard to do it on, when you have a high usage rate as Kyrie does. But I guess we'll move on to some D'Lo stuff, and there's been plenty of sort of questions about it, Nick, and I guess we'll jump straight into it. Michael Zuckerman, how can the Nets deal D'Lo in a potential sign and trade? Have any mock trades? And Link has come up with one. Sign and trade D'Lo to Minnesota or the Lakers a possibility. Can we get a pick or two from either of these teams?
Minnesota definitely has some picks. LA is pretty light on picks after that whole trade. So I think most chance in the sign and trade, unless the Nets were taking on a bad contract, which I would doubt they would want to do because they're using their cap space, elsewhere. It would probably be just like a second-round pick, and maybe a third team gets involved and they have to send a pick to take some of their contracts. Because if it was Minnesota, they have to either drop Wiggins or they got to get rid of Teague and Gorgie Dang, or they have to trade like Robert Covington. Like, obviously, Covington would be the easiest to move because he's an attractive player.
That'd be amazing. But if you want to take advantage of a rookie front office, but I think that they're pretty savvy down there with what they're doing in Minnesota. D-Rock has brought up D'Lo for Kuzma. What assets do the Lakers have remaining? Literally, that's it, D-Rock. They've got Kuzma.
And it's going to go into your cap space. So I think like the Nets are probably going to stay silent in terms of depending on what they hear from Kevin Durant. There's no point in them rushing on a sign and trade. The sign and trade can't happen until after July 6th anyways. So like they want to make sure if they're taking back contract, there's no shot at them to get KD or Kawhi or any of the players that's going to require them to have max cap space. If they were to be open to this, it'd be more likely they'd be going after Tobias Harris, who'd be a little bit cheaper than some of the other max free agents, and then trying to get back a good player or getting back some picks. But usually in a sign and trade scenario, unless you're taking on a bad contract, the recent, sign and trades in this new CBA have been just like second round picks in terms of compensation.
Yeah, and real G's move in silence like lasagna, one of the best lines of all time. I love that line. I wouldn't discount. I think it's hard to come up with the mock trades, and I think that you sort of rattle off those names. I wouldn't want any of them in a Brooklyn Nets uniform apart from Robert Covington. Obviously Tyus Jones is a
restricted free agent.
Restricted free agent. I get him mixed up with his brother for Duke as well.
They look alike.
They do look incredibly alike. And I wouldn't want to have Wiggins on my team. Obviously that would be horrific.
I would cry, and I would have to take back everything I ever said about Sean Marks and all the positive stuff. I think that whole scenario that was mentioned on Twitter and that the Wolves approached the Nets is just like the Wolves approached the Nets and the Nets hung up the phone. There's no chance in that happening.
Who would you cry more if we got Andrew Wiggins or Josh Jackson?
I would cry more. Oh, that's tough. Josh Jackson's worse on a personal level, but you can get out of that contract soon. Andrew Wiggins, you're screwed. His contract is terrible. That's arguably the worst contract in the NBA. It's that bad. I don't know. Andrew Wiggins is a fourth or fifth starter, maybe at best, but his basketball IQ is just questionable. And I don't like to take personal shots at players, but he just hasn't gotten better.
Yeah, no, he hasn't at all. And I think that since losing TJ Warren, obviously, in that sort of dump deal with Indiana, I think he could have been a nice piece that the Brooklyn Nets could have added. He had a nice sort of cap number and such. Obviously, if we were to do that sign and trade with D'Lo, I'm not really sure of many other assets. I know that we offered the sort of offer sheet to Tyler Johnson in the past. I don't think we need any more guards. That's for sure.
Not him for sure.
There's literally no other names I can necessarily think of. A lot of them, those other names are unrestricted. Guys like Rashawn Holmes, who could be a decent sort of backup big when we chatted about the sort of free agency stuff. But in terms of D'Angelo Russell, Nick, obviously it's a little more bittersweet for me because you're a Levert head, a Levert stan. I'm not necessarily a D'Lo stan, but I'm a D'Lo STA. Let's put it that way.
You're almost there. It's like we're playing horse and you just need the last letter.
That's it.
I mean, D'Angelo, I love what he did. And like I mentioned, he was big for the franchise, helped change the perception, had a great year, got them in the playoffs. We enjoyed him play. That Sacramento game, never forget that my entire life. Probably never forget the Lakers game where he got revenge. He's obviously going to be coming for revenge with the Nets. But also I think D'Lo doesn't feel that sour because the Nets helped him get to that level that he's at right now. He's not getting to that level most likely without the Nets and the coaching staff helping him get there. So I don't think there's any bad blood. And I believe a report came out before the Kyrie news was D'Lo's preferred destinations this summer were Brooklyn or LA.
Yeah, and I think that it seems to me that with all these sort of, the general Woj bombs, Shams bombs, and everything that's sort of happening around that, there would be some sort of leak from, D'Angelo, from Chris Brickley or D'Angelo's agents in that sort of sense to go, D'Lo is unhappy with how things have happened. He's frustrated and he can't wait to get out of Brooklyn. You almost sort of expected that. We sort of see that, left, right, and center. These guys are incredibly plugged in. So the fact that hasn't happened, I think shows that the foundation that was built and the base level of relationship with Sean Marks and especially Kenny Atkinson. Kenny was a huge part in the development of D'Angelo Russell. I think a lot of credit does go to D'Lo. I'm going to put it on him. Everyone's just like, well, he wouldn't have turned into what he is if it wasn't for Coach Kenny. Yeah, but I think he probably could have done it in a lot of other situations as well. I don't think he was going to do it under Byron Scott, but if you give him an average coach, I think D'Angelo Russell was always going to be an all-star. He might not be the peak where he goes, and I'm intrigued, and I like the fit, alongside Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Obviously, that's third sort of guy. His catch and shoot is outstanding. He's an incredible shooter and an incredible passer, and a nice sort of third guy. When we spoke about a lot of reviews and just analyzing him as a prospect on a championship team, that number 3 guy is almost that perfect fit for him. He would obviously, his usage rate would need to go down, and he's not necessarily used to that. He loves having the ball in his hands. If we were to sort of hark back and look and compare it to situations in Miami and in Cleveland, essentially D'Angelo Russell's the Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis is the Kevin Love, Chris Bosh. And I think Kyrie Irving showed that you can be incredibly successful, still get your own, still hit some massive dagger shots alongside LeBron James. And I think LeBron is going to have to take a minor step back for obviously AD, for D'Lo, for these sort of guys, because he is aging. He is superhuman, but at the same time, D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Davis are just starting to hit their peaks. they're going to be, running LA for however long it may be. Obviously D'Lo isn't there yet. And it's gonna suck for me because the Lakers are just a hated team, and I'm gonna almost be forced to, because I love D'Lo so much, get a D'Lo t-shirt jersey. But I'm gonna be repping this one till the day I die.
And I mean, like, you like LeBron as well. I like LeBron as well. So it's going to be easy to root for the Lakers. I like AD as well. So, like, I'm not going to mind if he goes to LA. I know some people hate it. And I think maybe if you don't want to give the coaching staff a ton of credit, I think the Nets organization providing him the stability, which he talked about when he came to Brooklyn, how it's just a completely different system from when he was in LA, coming to Brooklyn where things are kind of laid out for you and helping you get better. I think it has a positive impact. Obviously, the player does, 80 to 90% of the work. It's just about who puts them in the right route to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, Nick, we'll speak about this, harking back to Kyrie before we move to Tobias, Harrison, KD, and some other questions in the chat. How worried are you of this being a Deron Williams 2.0? It seems to be bumping off in the chat a bit around that. I don't think that it's necessarily going to happen. 4 years, $141 million. Kyrie Irving's going to be 31-ish at the end of that deal. I don't think he's going to age horribly. He does have injury history. I don't think his passion for the game can be questioned as much as it was for Deron. Darren, I don't know how to actually say his name. I don't really care.
I don't think he cares because he's not playing anymore. He probably could still be in the NBA if he wanted to as well.
He is still getting paid as well. But what are your thoughts on that comparison?
I think one thing, you nailed it right on the head. The passion. You cannot question Kyrie's passion. Kyrie wants to be great. He demanded a trade because he wanted to be a number one guy. He wanted to have the spotlight. Deron Williams did not like the spotlight. He didn't want to be this guy. When Paul Pierce and KG got traded to the Nets, they talked about wanting Deron to be an MVP type candidate, and he just didn't show up that season. He scored 0 points in a game. He took 8 shots. Kyrie would take 20 shots and miss them all and still keep shooting. So I think the demeanor of the players is completely different. If you want to say he's going to age badly, whatever you can say, but I think that Kyrie's game is extremely crafty, and even if he were to lose some of his athleticism, I still feel really confident about him. D'Lo, Darren's ankles went. His ankles just went bad. He had no crossover, and that was his go-to move. He really didn't have much else to his game other than shooting threes. So I think he just aged badly, and then the passion wasn't there to get better or try to improve his game in other ways to help him maintain that level.
Yeah, I think that Kyrie Irving, Deron Williams, before I was a massive follower of the NBA, I obviously know a little bit about NBA history. He was on Chris Paul level, second best point guard in the NBA, MVP conversation. Kyrie has had that as well to an extent. He's a top 10, top 15 player. I think that we're going to see, hopefully, if we see the best version of Kyrie Irving, we could see an MVP candidate in Brooklyn, obviously. A lot does have to fall his way. But let's start jumping into these questions. Michael Zuckerman's got a couple of good ones. Do you think a big three can actually happen? What percent would you give for Irving, Durant, and Jordan all playing for the Nets in 2019-20 season?
Well, let's put it straight up. If they sign DeAndre Jordan, he's not the third piece of the big three. That's just not who DeAndre Jordan is right now.
It's Karis LeVert, obviously.
Yeah, it's Karis LeVert. That's Karis LeVert taking the jump and being that guy. And then you even make an argument that maybe you could get one of the other guys to take a huge jump. So I think if they sign KD, DeAndre Jordan seems extremely likely to sign. It just seems like he's just going to go wherever they go, have a good time. He likes living in New York. He doesn't really have to play the full, starter minutes. He could back up Jared Allen or start 20, whatever it may be. I think it's pretty likely for that to happen. I don't think it's a guarantee, but we know that the Nets are one of the finalists for Kevin Durant. It's an official thing. He's going to engage with the Nets, the Knicks, the Clippers, and Golden State when free agency starts. So you got yourself in the conversation. That's all you can do at this point. KD wants to make the decision on his own. You're going to try to convince him. You do have some attractive things now that you have Kyrie to kind of help you push that. You do probably have the best medical staff out of those teams. And then also you could argue that the Nets have the best core of players to surround him with already there.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I think that DeAndre might even sort of try and lure. And I mean, we had this minor argument about why Kevin Durant would want to go to the Knicks, but I think DeAndre might try and lure him to the Knicks. I think that DeAndre might have this mentality where it's like he enjoys just being, playing at MSG. He enjoys the Mecca, so to speak. But I'll give a percentage of it as I sort of think about it. But I think that Kyrie Irving is obviously on the Brooklyn Nets. I think DeAndre is going to be a Brooklyn Net, or he is going to be a New York Knick, or whatever Kevin Durant lands on. You know, maybe not if he says the Golden yeah, maybe if he's not a Golden State Warrior, but I think DeAndre's, you know, going to be in New York one way or another. The percentage I'd put on it, I can't put it at any more than 50%, but I'm going to go like 35% because I don't have an immense amount of confidence until it's starting to be, you know, heavily reported. You know, Kevin Durant is this guy who we can't necessarily predict. You know, he's now like, all right, I want to team up with Kawhi. Where did that come from?
Yeah,
you know,
I felt like that report kind of got, like, a lot of people came out and said, like, Woj mentioned that. And then after, like, he was on ESPN afterwards and he was like, oh, I wouldn't say it's actually going to happen. It's just a possibility. Like, yeah, he backpedaled on that a lot after he stated that.
I mean, there's so many, you can divulge and analyze every little tweet and character that's tweeted out by these guys, you know, to the nth degree. But, you know, I think that main one that came yesterday, and I was like, oh, the Brooklyn Nets are the first team that Woj listed. You know, it was Brooklyn Nets, New York Knicks, Clippers, Warriors. I think that was the list in order. The Nets were in with a chance. And I think that, you know, next season, you know, it's not worth analyzing it, you know, to the fullest degree just yet because I don't think you can. You can't forecast next season without Kevin Durant when you don't have him, Kevin Durant. And you can't forecast 2 seasons ahead when you don't have Kevin Durant, who's not healthy yet. And the Achilles hasn't fully healed yet. And we haven't even seen him play basketball yet. And he's, you know, walking around on a scooter around Manhattan. And he looked pretty cool doing it. He looked pretty
slick. I honestly just want to go to the city to search for KD.
It would be hard to find. I mean, maybe that scooter. I wonder, how fast do you reckon you could get on that scooter around, like, Manhattan, around, like, you know, Midtown?
Depends how strong the other leg is. You know, it's like you're skateboarding pretty much.
He's got pretty skinny legs. But we'll give the percentage, I guess, Nick, before we move on to some other ones.
Yeah, I think 35 is good. Corey and I discussed it a little bit on the NBA outlet. We put it at a 40% chance. You know, I think the Nets would be either first or second. You know, they'd be out of the top 4 of that team. I think the Clippers are mentioned, but also a lot has come out as Steve Ballmer's kind of like got into Woj's ear a little bit. I don't think it's the high chance that he goes to the Clippers because it was just a week ago. It was Nets, Knicks, and Golden State. So I don't know if the Clippers really have a true chance. I think there's a real probability he goes back to Golden State. The Knicks would have to pull something out. Right now, they're not in a position really to get KD unless they can convince another free agent at this point. And I'm not sure who that free agent would be. If it's Kawhi, I'd be surprised, but it seems like the top 3 for Kawhi are going to be Toronto, Clippers, and now the Lakers in that mix.
Yeah, I dislike the Lakers narrative. I'm not 100% sure.
I didn't like it either.
Whether it's media created. I mean, I get it from a basketball perspective, but you know, we can chat about that, you know, obviously on the outlet tomorrow. But Michael's jumped in again. How will the division play out this year? Obviously, next season, can the Nets win the division? I mean, let's look at it from 2 perspectives, I guess, Nick. I think that obviously if we were to get KD, Tobias Harris, we can sort of divulge and analyze the Tobias Harris news as well, which has just been reported by Ian Begley and has been probably one of the lingering rumors as probably long as Kyrie Irving has been, if not much longer.
Probably,
Tobias Harris, Tobias Harris has probably been the number one, probably first free agency rumor that we've sort of spoken about. And you know, the fluctuation of desire to get him in the Brooklyn Nets franchise has been up and down like a wavy roller coaster. So I guess we'll address that question while also addressing the Tobias thing. So how will the division play out? What do you think? Obviously, it's an incredibly it's almost an impossible question to answer until, you know, July 15 or August.
Yeah. Because we look at Toronto. Toronto loses Kawhi Leonard. They're a playoff team probably, but they're not a top 4 seed. You know, they're dropping in. They're just getting to the playoffs if that, because there's a lot of aging guys in that roster. You look at Boston. The Nets are probably a little bit better than Boston. You know, Kyrie's better than Kemba Walker. The rest of the core, you can kind of argue that. They lost Al Horford. They're only going to have a room exception to bring somebody else. We know the Nets at the very least are going to get either some second-tier star in Tobias Harris or fill out the roster with other veterans, maybe not. So I think they'll probably be better than Boston. And then Philly's just a toss-up. If they steal Tobias Harris from Philadelphia, obviously that weakens them and gives them a better chance of taking them down. And the whole Jimmy Butler thing, Jimmy Butler doesn't really seem sold on wanting to go back to Philadelphia with all the reports coming out. Hey, I'm having my meetings in Miami. I'm going to give Houston a chance. I have some really big interest in signing with the Heat because of the way they treated Dwayne Wade. So now it's like, hey, if Philadelphia were to lose those guys, you could easily see the Nets bump ahead of everybody. But like you said, we're not going to know to July 15th because the entire division depends on free agency. And you could argue the Knicks could get in there if the Knicks somehow, I said it's unlikely if they land Kawhi, but if they do, they're in the mix as well.
Yeah, and I think if you're analyzing each team individually, like you said, Nick, you know, the Knicks could get Durant, the Knicks could get Kawhi, the Knicks could get DeMarcus Cousins, the Knicks could get Julius Randle. Who knows what you can't analyze it at this sort of stage. You can analyze maybe the Boston Celtics. Hypothetically, you can analyze them probably the most because it seems incredibly likely that they're going to get Kemba Walker as well, similarly as the Brooklyn Nets with Kyrie Irving. But at the same time, you know, where's their center? You know, they're going to have to add some guys around the wings too, similarly to what the Brooklyn Nets are going to be doing. You know, the Toronto Raptors, if they were to lose Kawhi Leonard, they take a massive step back and are probably barely a playoff contender. Obviously, you still have Pascal Siakam, who is still peaking. Kyle Lowry is in his sort of twilight years, as is Marc Gasol and the rest. Danny Green's an unrestricted free agent too. Yeah. The Brooklyn Nets aren't a finished product yet. And obviously, you know, every team, and the Philadelphia 76ers, on that Jimmy Butler stuff, I think Jimmy Butler really knows how to play the media well. With the whole Minnesota stuff, Rachel Nichols, the jump stuff, all the stuff leaking out, I think he's playing the media like a fiddle. And I think he's using it, this is just a personal opinion, he's using it for leverage with Philadelphia. And I think that's an incredibly good ploy by him and his agency, because that fifth year, I think that they are hesitant to do. Even though I heard on some ESPN pods the fact that the ownership and Josh Harris has told, you know, reporters that they are going to max out their guys. They are going to max out Tobias. They're going to max out Jimmy. I think they would be wise to do so, because I think there's a real opportunity for a championship here. And I think that if you have the opportunity to do that, you do it. And obviously with Ben Simmons on the horizon, getting a big deal in restricted free agency at some stage, you know, you need to maintain those assets. So I think that if they lose one of them, if Philadelphia were to lose Tobias Harris especially, I think it would be an absolute disaster with what they gave up.
True.
Landry Shamet, their core essentially, their young pieces, the future draft picks, and you lose Tobias Harris for nothing. And you've lost not only Tobias Harris, but you've lost all these young assets, which could have been, you know, a nice nucleus to provide some depth with that, which they so sorely lack. It would be a disaster. And the Tobias Harris with the Brooklyn Nets stuff, I guess we can analyze that. I think we've said, and we've made it well known on the buzz, that if we get Tobias Harris at the right price, I'd be incredibly happy. I'm not sure what that right price is. 4 years, $100 million, be pretty happy with that. Anywhere above 105 and in that sort of $110 million range, I would get a little bit sort of irky. But at the same time, you know, you don't know how a contract could be structured. Is it forward-ended? Is it back-ended?
True. That's a great point.
It's really hard to sort of think about it, but it seems to me, I think Tobias Harris will have some suitors. I think that he'll be an incredible fit in Denver. I think he'd be an incredible fit in Utah. I think that there's a lot of teams that could use his services for the right price. He would get the best price in Philadelphia. Would he be the best fit in Philadelphia? I have no idea. I think it's really hard to sort of analyze after 40 games or so, including the playoffs and such. I think he'd probably be one of the best basketball fits right now on the Brooklyn Nets. And he's made that known too on the Yahoo Sports sort of draft show, where he was sort of saying what he prioritized. He prioritized ball movement and style of play. Out of the teams we've spoken about, Denver and Brooklyn probably have the two prettiest and almost...
And Denver just re-up Paul Millsap, so the space isn't there anymore.
Did they? I didn't even see that.
Yeah, they picked up his option for the $30 million, which was one of my biggest surprises. I didn't expect them to get it. I get the aspect of them doing it because, hey,
I would as well
get any other players. But, I mean, they got Paul Millsap back, so now they're kind of out of the race. Utah picking up Mike Conley kind of hurt their chances.
Yeah.
But Tobias Harris does have one thing on his side. He's the best power forward on the market. It's a very thin power forward class. There's not even now Nikola Mirotic just went back to Barcelona. That's one guy off the list, not saying they're on the same level, but, hey, you don't really have as many backup plans with some of these guys getting scooped up. So he holds a little bit of leverage, like you said. Price-wise, definitely would prefer for it to be in that $24, maybe to $27 million range. You don't want to touch him at 28, 29, or 30 plus, because that's when it gets ugly, unless you really, really think that he can make a jump. which I'm just not sure there's that much more of a jump in his game, especially defensively. I think that's a concern. And the lack of aggression is a little bit scary for a guy you're going to be paying big bucks. You kind of want to see him take over. There's moments in the playoffs. Obviously, Philadelphia was stacked, but you'd like to see him kind of attack his matchup a little bit more. And you mentioned, what does he want basketball fit wise? And also, what type of option does he want to be? If he goes back to Philadelphia and they bring back Jimmy Butler, he's fourth option. It's a completely different thing if you're going to the Nets where your third option, maybe 2B or whatever it may be, he's right there. So it's a lot of things about what Tobias Harris wants. And does he want to take a discount to be close to home? We know he's from Long Island. He does have some ties to Atkinson's brothers. So a lot to develop on that front. Obviously, he's not going to be their number one target, but he's not a bad backup plan at all in my eyes.
Not at all. And he has shown, a propensity to be incredibly healthy, incredibly consistent as well. He's a guy that can put up 25 and 5 on you, 23 and 5 or something around that sort of range quite consistently on incredibly good numbers. He is a very adept three-point shooter, despite the fact that he didn't show that in Philadelphia. I think that the basketball fit wasn't necessarily the best. I think that the basketball fit in Brooklyn would be really, really nice. Mm-hmm. He's essentially the same age as Kyrie Irving. They're not necessarily old. I think Tobias Harris has a probably higher likelihood to maintain his consistency because he doesn't have an injury history behind him. And I don't think that he has, a wear and tear effect to him by having the ball in his hands. He's proven he can just be that sort of spot-up guy. He'll get his own. He's incredibly efficient. He knows how to create his own shot. And next to Kyrie Irving, I think it'd be a really nice fit. The number one thing that we sort of said is, what is your ceiling with Tobias Harris? Your ceiling with Kevin Durant is championship team. Yeah. Your ceiling with Kawhi Leonard is championship team. To a lesser extent, Jimmy Butler, it's near championship level because, he's proven it in the play. Yeah. And he's proven it in the playoffs. With Tobias Harris, you don't know because he hasn't proven it at that stage yet. If he had been on the Clippers in this postseason, I would have been incredibly fascinated to see how that fit was because, the offense runs through him. I'm going to throw out just a wild name just because I can because, we've got the podcast. We can do it. And I know it's a guy that you've never really been a fan of, but I freaking loved him. Yes, you know it. You know me well.
I honestly don't hate it as a backup plan. Yes. I don't think it's the worst thing. He's an expiring contract, extremely tradable. I've looked at it, I've thought about it, and they pick up another first-round pick, and he's an upgrade over Allen Crabbe. I think, defensively, there's a bigger drop-off from him and Tobias Harris. But I'm not completely opposed. I think his fit in Brooklyn will be really good. And there was actually a decent amount of talk when he signed with the Clippers that the Nets were one of the teams he was looking at, and the Nets were looking at him because of the fit in the offense.
So, yeah, and I mean, if you want to his playoffs were pretty positive. Yeah. I think he had a pretty positive postseason, and he can create his shot. He's an incredible 3-point shooter. I think our defense would obviously, take a step back, but I think that, Tobias Harris isn't necessarily, reinventing the wheel with his sort of defensive acumen too. When you got Jared Allen sort of holding it down there and he's going to continue to grow, and I think that you add other pieces around it. I think that the power forward position, the wing position is one that we're going to have to certainly focus on. We've obviously got a guy in Torian Prince. We've spoken about him before. His defensive acumen really does need to grow. But Tobias Harris, Kevin Durant, it seems to me that these are the guys that we're looking at and focusing on. And I think that both of them would make the Brooklyn Nets a better team. And if you're looking at the holistically as a whole, if we were to get Tobias Harris for the right price, for the right price, it's going to be a successful, free agency for sure, Marks. When we were talking about, just a couple of weeks ago and Coach Kenny was like, we've got plan A, we've got plan B, we've got plan C, we've got plan D. Plan A is sort of done, or plan A minus, whatever you want to talk about, because he's not Kevin Durant. Kyrie Irving isn't Kevin Durant. But Kyrie Irving is at least healthy. So, I mean, it's certainly, he's the third best free agent available right now, and we've got him. That's a pretty impressive achievement.
You could argue he's second with the Durant injury, because not saying that I don't think Durant's going to come back healthy, but, some people will make that argument.
Yeah, and I think that I think that Kevin Durant is going to come back probably healthier than any other guy who's done an Achilles injury before. But, it's going to be a fascinating, in less than 24 hours time, we're going to be jumping on and smashing out this entire free agency class. And there's already stuff that's been confirmed already, and it's not even July 30 American time, 6 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we got obviously Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker, Nikola Vucevic rumored, Klay Thompson rumored to be back. Like, there's so many big names already off the market before it even starts. And I think one crucial piece, depending on who they sign, if Kevin Durant were to sign, it's not as big a deal. But if they were to go Tobias Harris or get Gallinari, a lot more becomes of what the Nets' confidence is in Karis LeVert. Can he be that second option? Can he be that guy that can be the second best player in the team or be that 1B to a Kyrie Irving or something like that? I think if you're signing Tobias, you're praying that he makes a jump or somebody else on the roster, being Jared Allen, Rodions or Taurean Prince, make a major jump.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And I mean, there's going to be plenty of stuff to analyze going forward. Kyrie Irving's the first piece. Let's see how the rest of the jigsaw fits together.
Yeah, 100%. Do you have any other backup plans in mind if the Nets do not sign Kevin Durant or Tobias Harris or make the trade for Gallinari?
Can't really think of any. I think Julius Randle's been one that's tossed around, which, we're abject not fans of, and we've made that very, 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 very clear. I can't think, like you sort of mentioned, Nick, the sort of wing market outside of your top guys takes a real sort of step back. You could add a Danny Green type. I'm not 100% sure on a shortish deal. But I think you just got to add talent, and I'm not 100% sure. I know you've done a million podcasts for the NBA Outlet with Corey and a few other guys at OTG, so you might have a bit of better knowledge than me. Do you have like plan B, C, D up your sleeve?
I think you start looking at maybe the Morris twins, as possible power forwards. Nikola Mirotic was a guy you'd probably look at the right price. Like I mentioned, he's gone. Paul Millsap's now off the market. That was another guy you could have considered on a short-term deal. Like I said, the power forward market really isn't out there. Maybe you get nervous and you make a swing at Kevin Love. I don't know if that's something that the Nets would want to get into.
Interesting.
He would be a fit, but you don't know how good he really is, and can he, his numbers haven't really been efficient the last couple of years or really ever. So it's like, are we risking paying all that money to him?
I don't think he's been inefficient. I think that
I peeked at his numbers recently. In all of his years in Cleveland, I don't believe he shot over 45% from the field. Obviously, a lot of that is shooting threes, but from like a big and you're being the third wheel, you kind of want the third wheel to be a little bit more efficient. Obviously, he's never been in a position where he's like the second option really on a non-LeBron team, which is playing with LeBron's a different animal than probably any other player in the league.
Yeah, I think that Kevin Love is an interesting thing. I've always been a fan of him, and I think my fandom has grown with him and DeMar DeRozan being so forthright with their with everything that they've spoken about in relation to mental health has been awesome. And Kevin Love is looking fit, by the way.
He does look really lean.
I know he looks slick, and I think that he's gonna surprise some people in this coming season. I'd prefer to probably see him on a Portland. I think that could really take them to a new level. But I know a lot of people aren't Kevin Love fans. Will's brought up the fact bring back Brook Lopez, and a lot of fans in the chat aren't big Kevin Love fans either. Some are Julius Randle fans, but it's just a couple of days away, a little less than a couple of days away. But we'll be analyzing all these teams, including the Brooklyn Nets, and what happens over the coming hours, essentially. Yeah,
we'll be live tomorrow at 6 p.m. on the NBA Outlet talking all free agency news, depending on how long that goes. And if the Nets were to land Kevin Durant tomorrow, we will definitely be doing a live buzz whenever that happens, if it does happen or whatever free agent signings. We got to do this a little bit early because the Kyrie news popped off. But also quick shout out to Jared Allen, who was selected to be part of the USA select team. So it's great for him to train with some of the best basketball players in the world.
Let me just throw some shade at all the Knicks fans. Mitchell Robinson gets selected, and I know. And as soon as I looked at the comments, like the top-rated comments were like Mitchell Robinson, and his like stats or whatever. Ada SL, big fan of the show. You'll think KP will sign that max? I haven't heard anything. That has come out, and Dallas intends to throw the max at him. So KP would have been a nice fit, a very, very nice fit. But it seems Dallas intends to retain him.
And that was the right move by them. Obviously, they traded a lot to get him. I never really felt like he was leaving Dallas. The Nets would probably meet with him, but it was never really going to come of anything.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be fascinating to sort of see everything that sort of happens in the coming days and weeks and what this Brooklyn Nets franchise turns into. I'm giddy. It's going to be a fun couple of days.
100%. So I'm really intrigued to see what happens. Obviously, a lot of different things can go. Just quick thought: do you think there's probably a 0% chance the Nets were to land Kawhi now?
I'd give it 1% because you never say never.
Yeah.
But yeah, for everyone else who's watching YouTube now or subscribed on YouTube, make sure you get those notifications going because you want to get those notifications because we're going to be doing plenty of shows for the Buzz, for our outlet, and every other show that is on the OTG network because you want to be live. You want to be joining for this fun.
Subscribe, make sure you get on there because obviously the shows are just going to pop up. Last year we recorded a couple things. Next thing you know, LeBron signed. We had to do another show. So we'll be doing these live shows over the course of the next week for the outlet, for the Buzz, whatever it may be. As always, appreciate everybody checking in, leaving comments, questions. Jack, always a pleasure. And you can check out the show recorded podcast-wise, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, netsarplug.com, Dash Radio, and Google Play.